place. It does, doesn't it? Yeah. So YouTube has almost become like my library. Do you know what I mean? We are live, people. So good morning. Good morning on LinkedIn. If you're joining us live, good morning. As you can see, myself and Matt were just busy having a chat. So we'll just keep doing that, right?
Yeah.
So good morning if you're joining us on LinkedIn. Hasn't the weather been crazy? Like, it's blue skies now. I don't know what it is where you are, Matt. You're in Manchester, so it's probably raining, no?
Yeah. Thanks very much. No, blue skies, I promise you. I can't show you, but blue sky outside. And in a couple of weeks, or maybe a week and a half, it's meant to be like 27 degrees or something like this.
No way.
Yeah, I was having a look at it. So
yeah.
That's
To be fair, I think good morning, Adrian. Adrian, I'm telling you, you're going to get an award for the person that always says good morning first. You must. I'd love to see how you actually do it, Adrian. You must like literally just like sit there ready for us to go live, and then you time it and you say good morning. But the weather is crazy. Like I went out for a walk this morning. It was grey skies. I like my morning walks, and it probably links to what we're talking about, Matt. Wellbeing, right, and all of that. I love my morning walks. Sunny and cloudy in Cornwall. Sunny and cloudy. I think that's what it is. My daughter said that we're under some sort of Arctic weather pattern that's blown in or something.
Yeah.
Which is why we're getting, because we've had hail showers mixed with sunshine, mixed with it's crazy. Good morning, Sylvia Anna. How are you doing? But yeah, if we've got sunshine in Manchester, we're doing well, right?
yeah, you could say that.
I used to work in Manchester for a few years, and so I got to know all of the jokes about
You're allowed
the weather.
to say it. You're allowed to say it because you worked here.
I feel like I was an honorary Mancunian. I worked at the airport.
I won't take it personally. It's fine.
I worked at the airport for a couple of years. Yeah, but it felt like it always rained.
Yeah, I'm right by the airport. There you go. Small
Are
world.
you?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I used to do that run every day, like from Shropshire up to Manchester. That was a trek. And we were just talking about travel, weren't we? Like, and interesting. And how much travel affects, like your, when you get to the end of the week, like just physically how tired you are, and then also like emotionally, right?
It's really tiring, yeah. So here's me, oh, woe is me, like with my job. It's actually, I really love my job, but yeah, I do a fair bit of travel, and either driving can be tiring because you've got to stay switched on. But even if I'm sat on a train for 3 hours just watching Netflix, like it is tiring. I know that sounds like the world's smallest violin, but if you do that through the week too much, just sitting on a train, it does take it out of you in a strange sort of way.
It does. Do you know what? I'm glad to have found somebody else that watches whatever on trains. I do that. I kind of thought that I was the only one. I don't see many other people. I like to watch especially so on the way to wherever I'm going, which is typically London. I'm typically working, but on the way back, I love to just put like a YouTube video, some like rubbishy thing on and just watch it to just sort of decompress, right? Is that what you do?
They're pretending to work. They're not really working. They're switching the tabs. As soon as you look, it switches to a spreadsheet. And you look away, and it's back on, Love Island or whatever.
I'm keen to know what's your what are you binge watching on Netflix? I sometimes use this. I used to use this as an icebreaker for virtual. So in the comments as well, if you're joining us, please do say good morning, but also what are you binge watching currently? Or if you're on a train journey, what do you put on to watch on Netflix? Obviously, you're on a train, so it can't be anything too X-rated. So tell us, Matt, what are you currently binge watching on Netflix?
Do you know what? I need something new at the moment because I've just finished a couple. I quite like their little mini documentaries. I watched the one on Hulk Hogan. That was quite interesting. And the one the new one on Jamie Vardy. So I'm quite into my sports, right? So watching these little mini docs are quite cool. What's the last thing we watched? We watched the second series of Beef. Have you seen Beef?
No, not even heard of it.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I liked it. Okay. So the first series is very difficult to describe. First series is about two people falling out and they've got beef with each other. Two strangers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it just goes through and it just turns crazy. Like it goes from to crazy outcome. And there's a second series, which is a completely different cast. So we didn't know what to expect, but it's the same sort of vibe.
That's so interesting.
In that it starts small and it turns just you're like, how have we got here? And it's good. We enjoyed it. Yeah.
I think I watched the first episode, but I couldn't really get into it. But is this what you watch to like wind down? Does this help you wind down?
It does, because I've got 3 young children, so the only other thing I get to watch is, cartoons and
like Peppa Pig.
Well, they're a little bit older, so now I walk in and they're watching brain rot on YouTube. That's the thing now. They're watching, Mr. Beast do something, and I have to tell them to switch it off and watch cartoons.
Mr. Beast. Yeah. Great Western Railways don't do Wi-Fi. Do you know what? So a lot of them, even when they do Wi-Fi now, they don't allow you to stream. So I tend to tether on my phone because they don't allow you to do YouTube and stuff like that anymore. Have you found that?
No, I download them beforehand. I'm always prepared. It's got to be downloaded. There you
go. That's the tip.
Oh yeah, this is just turning into me moaning about stuff now.
Yeah, but, I'll be your therapist.
The Wi-Fi on trains. Do you know what? I've got a problem with Wi-Fi in that if it's terrible, just don't have it. Like, don't get my hopes up. Don't get my hopes up that you've got Wi-Fi, but it doesn't work. I'd rather you just said, we don't have any Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and it's that hope, a bit like, Sylvia sort of say, it's that hope that, for example, if you are coming back on the train after a long day, that you will be able to unwind by, watching whatever, or just doing whatever you want to do on Wi-Fi, but you can't, and that can be quite frustrating, especially if you've had a long day or a long week. Good morning, Vic Ramshetty. How you doing? Morning, all. Matt. It's been a long time. Do you know Auntie Sinena?
I must do. I must do. It doesn't ring an immediate bell. I'm so sorry, Sinena.
Sinena, how are you doing?
Yeah.
Sinena Coley was head of DI ASOS, so I wonder if you met her through there. Sinena, put in the chat where you know Matt from.
We've met each other.
Or from some other organisation, because Sinena does all kinds of things. Previously worked in the desert that was Dubai, and also, in PwC and all over. So interesting. Yeah, Matt's got the cocktail. Matt, I need to introduce you properly.
I feel awful now. I hate forgetting people.
let me introduce Matt properly. But as the question I've opened with it, I guess, is because we're going to be talking about workplace well-being, but we were talking a lot before we went on live about, I guess, almost like how do you wind down, like at the end of a long week? And certainly when we asked each other how we were doing, we were both a little bit. It's been a hard week, right? It's been a tough week for various reasons.
Right. Of course. Yes. Sorry, Sinena. Yeah. So the water cooler event. So we did. Well, I can get into this, but we did a podcast at the water cooler event and all the rest of it. So yeah. I've got it. I'm on it. Not
sulking at all, Matt. She is, and I'll be hearing about it afterwards in the WhatsApp. So I'm just kidding. So how's your week been? And my question out to you, if you're joining us, how do you wind down at the end of a week, so that you kind of go into the weekend and that your friends and family get the best of you rather than getting the worst of you because you've had a sort of like tired, sort of draining week. But let me do Matt's intro and then we'll dive back into that. So Matt, the tradition on here is that I get Claude to write your bio.
Okay.
And then you get to score it out of 10, right? So today I'm joined by Matt Smeed, founder of Sisu Psychology and co-founder of the Working Well community. Matt is a qualified business psychologist with a master's in occupational psychology, and he spent nearly a decade helping organizations understand what's actually driving poor well-being at work and what to do about it. His work sits at the sharper end of this space, focused on psychosocial risk management rather than the yoga and free fruit approach that, as we'll hear, still persists. Welcome, Matt. Hey. How did Claude do for your bio?
It's all right, although it said I've nearly got a decade experience. I wish it was that little. It's creeping on 2 decades now. Yeah, I'm a bit older than that.
It's taking your showbiz age, Matt.
Got you. I'll take it.
No, that's perfect. We are going to get into this. One of the things, and there is this thing about, I don't know, would you agree in terms of workplace well-being? So, you know, we sort of like jokingly there in the intro, there is something about, you know, a lot of companies have been doing and still are actually doing things like the free fruit.
Yeah.
Right. I'm currently working with a client, they have free fruit all over the office, so all of that. But you know, so the well-being industry and all of the perks and bits and bobs have been around for a long time, but still workplace well-being is going that, you know, there is this downward trend, and there's more stress and all of those things related to work. So where are we going wrong? Why is it not? Why is the well-being sector not fixing what the issue is?
Oh God, that's a big question, isn't it? Yeah. I've got some thoughts. So, yeah, more than a decade ago, many years ago, when I started working in this field, I feel like it's gone through waves and peaks and troughs. So, back nearly 20 years ago, stood at events, and the big push was that people just need to take well-being seriously, right? So, well-being will be a board level concern at some point in the future, and we need to take it seriously. So, it was all about awareness, really, at that, you know, 20 years ago, because before that, it didn't really exist. So then I feel like we went
Mental
through
Health
what, like
Awareness Week. Is it Mental Health
exactly.
Awareness Week now?
It is this week, yeah.
Is it this
Yeah.
week?
Not that I pay a
Even
huge amount of attention to those,
yeah.
but yeah, I
Yeah.
should do, perhaps. But anyway, so it was all about awareness, and there was a big push for that, and it kind of went up the agenda for a lot of organizations, which was great in many ways.
Yeah.
But what that led to was, a fair amount of kind of tick box exercises, and we're doing well-being, but we're not doing well-being. Then there was a bit of a shift that was towards a bit of a sharper end, but unfortunately, the shift was towards putting all the responsibility onto the individual. So then it became, we need resilience, right? So everyone just needs to be really resilient and change their mindset, and growth mindset, and all this sort of stuff. Which, again, as with the awareness piece, there are positive aspects to that. Like I'm an advocate of resilience. I like to think I'm fairly resilient. It's fair. It's fine in some ways. But what that became was an excuse for organizations to shift that responsibility away from themselves and onto the individual. So we don't need to create a good workplace. We can just toughen people up. So there's a bit of a shift there. And what I've seen more recently, and this is interesting, is a real kind of backlash against that. So the backlash against that has meant that a lot of either organizations or in particular gurus who are out there, and look, I'm saying that in inverted commas because I've probably been called a guru at some point in my life as well. I hate the term, but are now saying, well, no, you don't just want to do the tick box exercise. You don't want to do the yoga and the free fruit. What you want to do is systemic, strategic, preventative approach to well-being, job design. And again, I totally agree. And there's aspects of that I think are great. And we'll talk about psychosocial risk that fits into that. And it's ace. But as with all things, there's indirect impacts that you're not expecting. And it led to a backlash against things like free fruit and perks and benefits. Which, what's wrong with free fruit in the office? There's absolutely nothing wrong with free fruit in the office. Like, I would love some free fruit in the office. I would, I love a bit of yoga. Like, so do you see what I mean? Like, there's these real backlashes.
Like a pendulum.
And the industry tends to it feels like it overcorrects sometimes, and therefore anyone. So my real issue with that is there's lots of people now doing well-being roles within organizations, so head of well-being manager, these sorts of things, and they're doing their absolute best in a really difficult context and really difficult circumstances, often with no budget or limited budget. And now they're being told that all the stuff that they're doing on mental health awareness and the free fruit and the perks and benefits, supporting people, that actually that's a load of rubbish, and that you should be doing this instead. And I've got a bit of an issue with that as well, because what that leads to is just a huge amount of imposter syndrome and people being told that what they're doing isn't good enough. Whereas, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, right? We're all just trying to be a bit less stressed and a bit more happy. No one's maliciously sat there trying to. Well, maybe some people are, but no one's maliciously sat there trying to stress people out. But so I'm not sure where that leads us, and it doesn't necessarily answer the question. But it's interesting how this industry goes.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and it was, I mean, thank you for taking us through that little almost like plot history. Yeah. Do you know what? Because and when you came to the resilience, oh my God, it's so interesting. And Junior, I literally was thinking that, when you said resilience, and I'm guessing this might have, for a lot of people in the comments, they might have thought, yeah, that whole resilience thing. Because I definitely remember going through a phase where almost like resilience was literally the word that, yeah, the organizations were using almost to like get out of the fact that they had like quite toxic work environments actually,
Yeah.
or if it wasn't necessarily the whole work environment, it was individuals in the organization whose leadership style was very demanding, bullying, da, da, da. Then it, as you say, it became, oh, let's put the onus on individuals to be more resilient. Like, and it's, Junior said this, participant in one of my workshops said that resilience is now a weaponized word by corporate to glorify overworking. Yeah, so overworking. It's really interesting, isn't it? That history of things that have happened in terms of, like ways of working, words that have become popular and then less popular, and then it's this and then it's that, and maybe it's not one or the other that's necessarily the issue. One of the things we talked about just before we were talking about was changes in like working patterns and stuff that's going on in society. So for example, like sort of COVID and different working patterns, what do you think, what impact do you think that has had on this whole space of well-being and stress levels at work and all of that?
Well, yeah, massive. It's there's so much change. So what COVID did was it forced change, didn't it? So all the
Mhm.
research we have from the last, like I say, 20 years seems to
Yeah,
suggest that flexible working is always a positive thing for both well-being and performance. So that's what all the systemic reviews and all the systematic reviews and all the meta-analyses show us that's true. However, the issue is that research wasn't done in the context of everybody being forced to work remotely.
mm,
So what you were
mhm,
measuring there was that flexibility was great for those people who wanted flexibility, flexible working patterns,
right,
and working remotely, and all the rest of it. So what that's led to is the research seems to suggest that yeah, remote working and flexible working is great for everyone. The
mm,
risk is, I've spoke to lots of people over the years who've told me that they really don't like working remotely, that they much prefer to be back in the office. And what COVID did was it shifted that. Now, like I say, as with all these things, there's real benefits to that. There's absolutely real benefits that I've seen organizations who they before COVID they would say we can't possibly do this remotely. We need to
yeah,
get these 10 people and spend a load of money, effort, time, resource, get them to the other side of the country to have a 45-minute meeting and then travel them back again. And then COVID was this light bulb moment where they said, "Oh, we can just do that on Teams," and it saved a
yeah,
lot of time and energy and resources. So it's great. But as with all these things, it's complicated because
yeah,
some people are now working remotely who don't want to work remotely. Sometimes teams aren't getting the benefits that you get from being in the office. But what do?
yeah,
You force everybody back? That doesn't feel right
yeah,
either.
yeah, yeah,
So that becomes an issue.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's
It's
definitely got us thinking about it.
Yeah, it's difficult, and there's no. I think Sylvia sort of hit the nail on the head here with like the work. So first of all, there's a couple of points in here. The workplace has a problem with the word holistic. So there is this thing about it maybe not being one thing or the other. You have to look at the whole system, if I use that word, and then this idea that there is not just one solution that fits all, and that a resolution needs to happen instantly with a black or white approach. And that, I mean, you're absolutely right, Silver. I think in terms of, I think especially if you think about like, certainly workplaces again, like I guess with a more sort of like Western sort of like capitalist lens of,
Mm,
there's always like a solution to every problem, right? And productivity, and let's sort this thing out because that's what leaders and managers are sort of hired to do. People do look for these kind of like instant solutions, and for example, the return to office mandate. So it's almost like it's trying to force everybody into something, and almost like we haven't yet figured out what those solutions are that
mm,
mean that you have like working patterns where people have more autonomy, but it still kind of works for the
mm.
whole and for teams. It's quite challenging, right, to do that.
Yeah, yeah. It really is. It really is, and that's led as well to the proliferation of well-being apps and providers in that kind of space who, as again, I tend to take an optimistic view on this. I feel like the intent is positive, that we're looking for ways, sure, they're trying to make money as well. I get that. We live in a capitalist society. But I do genuinely believe there are purpose-led people within these organizations who are thinking, this is the thing that will make the difference.
Yeah.
It will solve this. But then the risk is, it ends up organizations looking for a quick fix when
definitely.
you're not going to find one, right?
No. It's interesting. I've definitely seen more and it's interesting. It probably links here to what Vikram is saying, but because I've definitely seen more EAP, so employee assistance programs, and or competitors into that space, really leaning into like the well-being aspect of it and really trying to fill in that gap, which I think maybe not all EAPs were doing really well. So Vikram's got here, one guest in my podcast said something like this: if you're a CFO, you might not be interested in well-being, but you'll certainly be interested in risk mitigation and performance protection. Absolutely, right? Because it links to the bottom line ultimately for the CFOs in the world. Let's go on. We're gonna.
But what I was just going to say, well, that's a shift in the industry, which I think we're going to talk about, which is around the psychosocial risk piece, right? Because that is something else that I've seen, and with all these things, I don't think it's the panacea. I don't think it's going to be the shift that suddenly solves everybody's issues and all the rest of it. But it is an interesting shift. And for those who don't know, so psychosocial risk is essentially. So how would I put it? It's the reduction of harm. So it's taking a risk-based approach to well-being and performance. So rather than saying like, how do we improve people's well-being at this end, it's almost like, what are the things that could potentially, like a risk management approach, so risk assessment approach. So what are the things that could cause people harm in this company? What are the hazards, we call them, the things that are out there that could cause harm? How does that convert to risk for people? How likely is it to cause harm to them? And if it did, how bad would it be? And then based on that, you create control measures. And control measures are typically avoid, mitigate, and respond. So if I was going to use an example from the world of physical health and safety, your hazard is the ladder that you're being asked to walk up or to climb. The risk is how likely I am to fall off that ladder, and if I did, how hurt would I get? And the control measures are avoid. Maybe I don't need to go up the ladder in the first place. Mitigate, I do need to go up the ladder, but I'm going to wear a harness. I've got some help. I've got the correct PPE. And then respond is, what's the process if I fall off the ladder? Like, where's the nearest first aider? Where's the nearest hospital? These sorts of things. And psychosocial risk management is almost taking a similar sort of approach, but with psychological or psychosocial risks. So what are the hazards? They tend to be things like sheer work volume. It can be lack of control. It can be poor work relationships, poor paying benefits, all these different sorts of things. So they're the things that could cause us harm. What is the actual risk, and can you measure that within your business? And therefore, can you create some control measures to stop that? And part of that is, can you design these pressures out of the business? Just because something's always been done this way, if it's causing lots of people lots of stress, do you have to do it that way, or can you just do it differently? There's been a shift certainly towards that more kind of risk focused approach. And then if you take that, what that means is that well-being becomes an outcome of that. So actually what you're doing is you're fixing the workplace, the inherent aspects of the workplace that could cause harm or benefit to someone. Because some of these things they've got two poles, right? Work can be a really positive thing. It motivates us. But well-being is an outcome of that, alongside things like performance. So if you get that right, what it leads to is people who perform at high levels and smile on their face, sense of purpose. Things,
I really like that. If people want to know more specifically about that psychosocial risk management, I mean, apart from getting in touch with you, is that something, because I know you've got your own like content, like is that something that you've gone into more in terms of like in some of your like podcasts or like
so I've got the podcast. We speak to people in this area. Like I said, I try to shy away from being this guru who's got all the answers. I'll talk about this later if you like, in terms of what I would like, what I feel my role in all of this is, connecting people and speaking to interesting people. But we got the community as well, which is for wellbeing leaders, which I can tell you about. ISO 45003. If you're interested in psychological safety, it's not psychological safety, that's something different, which we can get into, but psychological health and safety, or psychosocial risk and psychosocial safety. then the ISO standard 45003 is certainly a good place to start with this, because that's really a standard that was launched in about 2022, I think, summer of 22. And that's about how should or could businesses manage
it's
well-being from a risk-based approach.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's one of the things that stood out for me when I first got in touch with you, because you might remember at the time I'd had a conversation with an organization that had an acute need where they were getting like literally just scores of people going off sick, and it was a really, really stressful role, and they were looking at almost like the reactionary bit of like, how do we fix those people that are going through that challenge? And when I spoke to you, and it sort of just came out of the conversation, because when you started talking about, no, you got to step back, and you got to look at the whole thing, right? Not just how do we support those people that are then stressed because of this thing over here. You got to look at the thing over here as well as then everything through the journey. So I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, just very quickly on this, and I can't take credit for this. The amazing Bridget Jelly, who works for Rolls-Royce in a wellbeing role, may not have come up with this, but she certainly introduced me to this. The fish pond analogy. So the fish pond analogy, which works quite well around psychosocial risk, is that essentially the fish represent the employees swimming around, right? The pond water represents the environment that they find themselves in. And what organizations are quite good at are spotting, well, sometimes quite good at spotting when fish are struggling, scooping them out of the water, nursing them back to health, and putting them back in the water again. The risk with that is, what if you're putting them back in dirty water? What if you're putting them back into a toxic environment with sharks swimming around, So actually, psychosocial risk management isn't about fixing the fish. It's about, how do we clean the pond water? How do we, so that we're reducing the harm at source.
Love that. There's a question in here that we're going to come back to. Good morning, Jade. Thank you so much for your question. Thoughts on the impact of hybrid and remote working on young people's development and social connection specifically. So we'll come back to that. Vikram said, Matt, thank you for explaining the risk mitigation so well, linking it back to employee well-being and highlighting the current market shift. Well-being becomes an outcome is a t-shirt quote. Yeah, I might get on a t-shirt, Vikram. I'm always looking for new things to put on a t-shirt. So let's just go back to Jade's question here. Interested to hear your thoughts on the impact of hybrid and remote working on young people's development and social connection. So I guess thinking about young people specifically in this new way of working. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard. Like I say, so look, I'm 40 now. God, that sounds horrible saying that. But I work remotely. So we were saying I travel. So I travel to clients, I work on site, but primarily my office is just at home, right? And as you can see, surrounded by the kids' stuff. And that suits me down to the ground. I've got 3 young children. I absolutely love it. I don't want to go into an office and sit there, to be perfectly honest. However, young people coming into the workplace, I can absolutely see why you would want to do that. I think about my first years in the job, and I'm not sure I can even properly imagine what it would have been like had I just been that. And often, these people are like living with their parents, so they don't have I'm lucky enough to have an office space, and that I share with the kids. But you meet people online who I work with who are sat in their bedroom of their parents' house in a back, and they're expected to what? Just get up to speed with everything that's going on in the workplace, to understand the culture of that organization. What, through a camera, through Teams? Like, that's very difficult to do. So yeah, I do worry about worry is the right word. I do worry about that. It is a new challenge, and with all these things, with all these things, there's pros and cons to it, aren't there?
And just to throw my 2 pennies worth in it as well, because I've kind of got 2 sides, and I always can't decide what I actually think, right? Which is, it's fine. I'm comfortable with this, right? But on the one hand, I'm like, so for example, 3 of my closest friends I met at work in my 20s, right? So it goes to that point, and and you learn so much. I think we talked about this on last week's LinkedIn Live. You learn by osmosis. Like, when you're early in your career, you learn by overhearing conversations, hearing people on the phone and how they deal with things and kind of unpacking things. That's how you learn when you're like earlier in your career. And then, the social connection. I met three of my best friends and we're still friends now, like X years on, we're still friends. We still go on holiday together.
Yeah.
But there's another part of me, just playing devil's advocate, that's like, it is some of that though, because maybe we spend too long at work. Should we be encouraging people to get a life outside of the office, to make social connections outside of just the office? I'm just kind of throwing it out there.
I'm with you. And look, I look back fondly on the start of my career where I did work in an office and I did go in and I met people and I've stayed in touch with those people, like you say, still friends with them today. Do I miss the hour-and-a-half commute to do 7 miles into Manchester back and forth? Like, absolutely not. Like, I don't miss that at all. And I didn't like that at the time, So it was never perfect. I guess that's the thing, isn't it? Like, we do look back on the past with rose-tinted glasses. We think, just before we went live, we were talking about how people don't go for a drink on a Friday afternoon, do they? That used to be a thing. Like, not that it was a big thing when I started working, but certainly you'd go for a couple of drinks and take a 2-hour liquid lunch on a Friday and then come back and get absolutely nothing done in the afternoon. And there's part of me that looks back on that with rose-tinted glasses. Maybe that was a good thing. Or maybe there were positives to that, because as you say, you got to know people in a way that you wouldn't do through a Zoom call. But there's also downsides to that as well. I think the honest answer is that there's no perfect solution, and this is really what my take on all of this is. That there is no perfect solution to this stuff, but we operate in a system and we are affected by the context, and like it or not, technology is growing and AI is building up and remote working is a thing. So in that context, we need to co-create what we want that to look like together. We want to design those things together. And that's why I started the community. That's honestly why I started the community, because I was speaking to so many different wellbeing leaders who were asking me questions like this, like, should we do remote working? Yes or no? And I'm like, I number one, I can't give you a yes or no answer because it depends on so many different factors. But also, I'm not sure you should be really asking me, external consultant, guru, expert. I think you should be talking to these 10 other businesses who have also got the same challenge and working out together. Do you see what I mean? So that was why the community was born, because I was like, I've had this same conversation with 5 other people. You need to speak to each other. You don't need to speak to me. I'm almost putting myself out of work here, but I was like, you need to speak to each other rather than me.
I'm all with you on that. There's this thing about connecting people that are having like similar challenges and helping them work. But you're the catalyst, right? That's bringing them together, like the connector.
Hopefully I'm not completely useless. I don't want to completely take myself out of it.
So, Sylvia's put an interesting comment here. I love, Sylvia, the way that you always bring it back to like the humans, which I think that's something that we sometimes lose, especially through this Western lens, right? In organizations, risk and performance is, and I'll add in there, unfortunately, the only language that that leadership understands. Certainly, some leaders and is interested in. I can see how this could work, and in my opinion, is another step towards dehumanizing the workplace and the people with it. You're right. You're not wrong, Sylvia, in terms of, unfortunately, when you look at some leadership teams, risk and performance in terms of bottom line is often the language that they understand. So it's, I guess, the challenge is for people like you, Sylvia, and I guess in the work of this space of wellbeing, is how you translate this work around humans and human behavior and human emotion into language that will get leaders to do something different, right? It's the challenge, isn't it? Like it's finding a balance for it, I guess.
Yeah. So quick thought on that is the individual difference is the big difference here between the world of physical health and safety and psychosocial safety. Look, I'm an advocate for psychosocial safety management. I think it's a good movement for the industry to take, because it gives it a bit more of a hard edge and takes it away from just being soft and fluffy, which I think was a risk previously. But as I said before, a couple of things. One, I think that the industry can sometimes overcorrect to the point where it says those soft and fluffy things like free fruit and connecting people and all the rest of it aren't important, when absolutely they are. Like, absolutely they are.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the individual difference is a thing here. So to go back to my previous analogy, where the ladder analogy that I was talking about falls down is that if 100 people fall off a ladder, 100 people will get hurt, right? That's how physical health and safety works. Whereas if 100 people work an 80-hour week, 50 might really struggle, but 50 might be absolutely fine based on a whole host of different things, based on how much support they've got, based on stuff going on outside of work, based on their own internal, back to this word, resilience and how they look at it. So that's where unfortunately psychosocial management, risk management isn't the be all and end all, because it doesn't take into account individual difference quite enough.
Yeah, that links to, we've got a couple of comments in here that link to this. I'm just gonna, Adrian, I think you've said it, you've summed it up perfectly, literally what, as Matt was explaining this. So on the fish pond analogy, all of the fish aren't the same, and it links to Jill's point as well. So some of the fish will have needs and challenges that aren't legible to those managing the pond, which kind of, I think that links a little bit to what Jill was saying as well. And so your explanation there, the ladder analogy of why, even in terms of like assessing that risk and some of the outcomes that might come as a result of that particular way of working, will be different between individuals. Jill's morning, Jill has asked a specific question again around what things do we need to consider that sit at the intersection of wellbeing and diversity? So when looking at role clarity or role ambiguity and individual differences in preferences. Just your thoughts around that. I mean, I know it links to what you were just saying about,
questions this morning, aren't they? Yeah, good job. Good job I don't drink caffeine. Maybe I should change that to this. Look, I think again, it's
and
something.
Hardev's question as well. Yeah.
Well, it needs to be something that is brought into the conversation around this, because we were just talking about the individual difference. So that's where this inclusion piece comes in. Oh, it's really tricky. It's really tricky because there's always unintended consequences of some of this stuff. So I'll give you an example of that. I'll give you an example to bring it to life. So one of the things that I saw a big shift towards in recent years, actually, you're probably talking the last 1 or 2 years, is, and this seems to have come from the inclusion agenda or around that, is this whole idea of bringing your whole self to work, right? Bring your whole self to work, which, again, on paper, sounds like a really great thing. You're like, yeah, absolutely. I don't want people who are sat there in the workplace thinking, I don't belong here, or I feel like I'm being excluded, and all that. So absolutely, you don't want that. But at the same time, do you want everyone bringing their whole self to work? Because I've met some people who they definitely don't want to bring all of that to work, right? What happens if you're, pardon my language, 9 o'clock in the morning? What happens if you're a dickhead? Like, you don't want to bring that to work. But even if you're not quite as bad as that, we all adapt our behavior as well, right?
Yeah.
I'm not exactly the same person with my kids as I am with my mates, as I am with you now, as I am client. You adapt. You adapt. So this idea of bring my whole self to work, what do you mean by that? Do you mean like you want me to act like I would with my mates watching the football with a client? Like, because I don't think that's I don't think
I mean, that certainly used to happen in the Friday lunchtime drinking sessions that I remember. But I wonder whether, just linking to what Adrian's question, and then also Jill's and Hardev's as well, because everybody's kind of touching on this. I think especially I think everybody's loving this whole psychosocial risk management idea. I wonder whether there's something about it links to, I think, specifically what Adrian was saying right at the end. He said some of the fish will have needs and challenges that aren't legible to those managing the pond. And then we're going to then go on to AI, right, and what that's doing to this workspace. But I wonder whether in doing the psychosocial risk evaluations and assessment, we just need to make sure that we've got people involved in that do understand the breadth, do understand, your analogy of, if it's 100 people and there's this ladder, or there's a particular design of the workplace or the job, etc., and it potentially is going to affect people differently. We just need enough people doing the risk assessment, or the people that are doing the risk assessment talking to a good enough breadth of individuals, so that they're not just talking to the 50 that are on that ladder and have no issue with it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's how do they make sure?
And I'd say another one.
I'd say another one
linked to that is look, I'm not trying to offend whole swathes of the population, but as stereotypically, and I've met a lot of these people working in health and safety tend to have quite a, not a binary outlook on things, but if you're managing physical health and safety, some things are quite cut and dry, like that is safe and that is not safe. Like, wear your PPE here, don't wear your PPE there, go to, I've worked at like power stations when they literally have a line drawn on the floor and it's like, that side of the line is not safe and you need to have your PPE on, and this side of the line is safe and you don't. And as I said earlier, I'm an advocate of this movement from health and safety, almost like the Venn diagram between health and safety and well-being, like overlapping more. I'm fine with that. But you cannot take that same binary risk management mindset and apply it to human beings when it comes to their psychological well-being, because it doesn't quite work that way. Because as one of the viewers showed before, we're talking about human beings here. We're not talking about,
What's really interesting, and what I would bring into this as well, I'm going to bring employee networks in, because I know we've got some employee network leads in the chat. So Hardev in particular, juniors in the chat, and I bumped into very randomly. I bumped into an employee network lead at dinner last night out in Birmingham. I don't often go out on a school, like maybe that's why I'm so tired this morning, Matt. I was out in Bank and I bumped into and I won't name them, really well-known employee network lead, but what she was saying, she recently stepped down, but she actually said we were talking about employee networks working with like the HR teams, the well-being teams, the people teams, and she said the thing that we don't look at when networks aren't working as effectively is things like the sickness absence, the stress levels, the which often the things, rightly or wrongly, because these networks sometimes become a little bit like therapists, which they shouldn't be, but they sometimes become the people that people go to when they are struggling, like with their like emotional well-being. They're almost like a little bit of a bellwether. So maybe one of the things that I would throw in is if there's an organization listening to this about like psychosocial risk management, as well as obviously getting in touch with Matt, maybe talk to some of your employee networks, right? About just, they are a good bellwether of how people are feeling generally, which let's go on to AI, right? Because you can't barely step out your house at the moment or switch your computer on without hearing about AI, and it's either going to be the best thing since sliced bread, or it's going to literally bring the whole world to an end. So, and people are talking about it a lot in the workplace now, particularly about, impact on, jobs and things like that. So what are your thoughts about what people teams and well-being teams should be thinking about in terms of AI? Is it a hazard and something that we need to be aware of in that risk management, or is it a control measure? How should we be thinking about AI in this space?
Yeah, well, exactly as you've just mentioned there, and we talked about this previously. If you were going to use that risk management terminology, I think it can be both. So that's what makes it complicated. So it can absolutely be a hazard, right? In the sense that has the potential to stress people out, I guess, but to steal their jobs. So it could lead to a huge amount of job insecurity or uncertainty around jobs. So it is in itself a hazard. At the same time, it is absolutely a control measure. It's a control measure for me. Like, I have so much to do and all the rest of it, and workload is high. So being able to rely on AI to help me write this thing a little bit faster, or or save me some time on something, it helps me to manage that workload. But then I saw something recently that then blew my mind about that. Then it feels like it's saving you time, but what it's doing is it's creating more intensity. So this was a study that I read recently, and I was like, oh yeah, of course it does. So what we're doing is I do this. I'll outsource the boring stuff, right? So I'll outsource the menial. So I don't outsource the creative thinking. I do not say, ChatGPT, please write me 10 LinkedIn things that you think my audience might like, because I just don't think that would be helpful. But what I would do is, here's a LinkedIn post that I'm thinking about writing, and here's all my thoughts about it. Can you make that into plain English? put something that actually sounds like a human rather than the ramblings of a mad person. So it took me some time. But what this study was suggesting was, therefore, you don't get the break from doing the kind of the boring stuff, and you're spending all of your time doing very cognitively demanding things. and that's okay, because it means that you're doing the stuff that I guess you should be doing. But then when's the break? When's the break? And then look, if I wanted to go even more Terminator, I'll be perfectly honest, I think it could pretty much replace like a huge amount of jobs. I feel like it could replace my job, if I'm being perfectly honest. Could it?
I don't agree.
I think it could.
No.
Could it come up with all the stuff that I've talked about today?
Yeah.
I think it could. I think it could, to be perfectly honest.
It
wouldn't deliver it with the same personality, right? But it would be able to. It would be able to do it. I don't know.
Put it in the comments if you just. I'm interested. Could AI take Matt Smeed's job?
Well, I'll tell you another one. Because I interviewed for my podcast. I interviewed a guy who, Chris, he's called. He's amazing. He runs the, I always get this wrong, British Association of Psychotherapists. So it's an association for psychotherapists, right? So therapy providers. And I asked him that question. Do you think, this is probably about a year and a half ago, bear in mind, so things have advanced then. And I said, do you think that AI can replace therapists? And he said no. And I don't know. I think it can. Not the whole way, because we need some human connection and all the rest of it. But in terms of early intervention and giving someone a sounding board and signposting them in the right direction, like, and also, like, from the rose-tinted glasses perspective, we put AI up against this perfect version of what humans can do. So, for example, it would sound terrible. Well, people are already doing it, right? They use AI to filter CVs and, to do the first stage, maybe second, third stage, perhaps, of hiring process. And everyone's, I think, probably immediate reaction to that is, God, that doesn't feel right. Like, that doesn't feel right. Like, having a bot read my CV and tell me if I can do a job or not doesn't feel right. But what are you comparing that to? You're comparing that to a human being who you're saying is completely unbiased and gives you a fair shake. Like, that person doesn't exist either. Like, when a human being's reading your CV, they're not doing it properly either. So the AI is not a perfect solution, but neither's the human. So again, as with all this stuff, Cheryl, I wish I had the answers. I don't. Maybe AI will die on the vine. I doubt it.
Well, maybe there is something about how organizations maybe create space for these kinds of conversations. So I wonder whether that helps to allay some of the anxiety. I reckon, and I haven't really seen the stats about this, but there's got to be a high level of anxiety in a lot of organizations there's just, it's almost like every week or every month there's announcement, such and such a big firm is now laying off X thousands of jobs, and they've said it's because of AI productivity. So I wonder that there may be something, and I'm not sure that organizations are thinking about the impact internally on well-being of like this. It almost feels like, what's that story? Is it Damocles with the is it Damocles with the knife? It must feel like that. Like literally, especially based on, depending on what your role is. But if your role is, it's the sort of role that really comes straight out of the Victorian age, right? It's like, as I once overheard somebody saying at a conference, that their role was Control C, Control V, as in like copy and paste all day in a spreadsheet. People that are doing those sorts of roles must literally be thinking, my role's going to be up for this. And albeit that, organizations are potentially talking about retraining or other skills, I've got a theory that, human connection, slightly more sort of like spiritual, holistic skills are going to become, kind of, but I don't know whether organizations are really talking openly about what AI might mean, or whether they're literally just having these conversations behind closed doors and then announcing, we're starting a consultation process because, 5,000 roles are at risk. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so that's at the crux of all of this, I think, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk to your audience about today, is that no one knows the answers to these questions. Everyone's got, positive intent. Well, not everyone's got positive intent, but a lot of people have got positive intent. So the intent's there. But with many of these well-being challenges, human challenges, the key is not pretending you've got all the answers. And that's where the industry's got it wrong. And right back to your original question about why downward trend is because people think that they've got all the. I'll give you another example of this. So in the community that I ran a session recently on psychological safety, right? So you've heard of psychological safety, APS, and we want to create spaces where people can be vulnerable and speak up and all the rest of it. All of that sounds amazing. Like I've not met anyone who looks at the definition of psychological safety and says, that doesn't sound like a great thing, great idea, brilliant. And actually there is a lot of research that seems to suggest that that's linked to lots of outcomes, positive outcomes and benefits for individuals and organizations. Great. But there is a massive gap still in the research and in practice of how do you actually do that? How do you do that? All very well saying create a safe space. What do you mean by that? So I went to an event a couple of years ago and I asked a question to the panel about this. So at the time, it was after the outbreak, so maybe it's more than a couple of years, after the outbreak of the Ukraine war, right? And they were suggesting that you need to create safe spaces in your organization for people to be able to discuss that sort of thing. Like, the Ukraine war, or now you could talk about Israel and Palestine and the stuff going on in Iran. So you need to create safe space because people are human beings and they exist inside and outside of work. My question was, how? Do you mean I set up a Teams meeting on a Tuesday afternoon to talk about Israel? Like, because that doesn't quite feel right.
Or safe.
Well, yeah, exactly. Or safe, exactly. So anyway, so that's the whole thing. But I do think that's the gap. I think that the gap is in terms of implementation, and in lieu, well, so you're trying to solve a problem like AI, like psychological safety, like well-being, whatever it might be, and then you hit this gap of implementation of like, how do we actually do that? And then what happens is one of two things. Either internally, some senior person says, this is what we're doing. AI is useless. Let's completely ignore it. And they jump that gap by making a decision, or they pay some consultant to help them jump that gap, or apparently build them a bridge over the gap. I'm going for the metaphors this morning. Apparently build them a bridge over that gap, but the bridge is made of like toothpicks and it doesn't work. So I'm getting lost a bit there, but it's back to what you were talking about. What's more important is us all just saying we don't really flipping know, but we need to be talking about it, because if we don't talk about it, it's bad. And if we just make a decision and say this is a solution, it's bad. But what we need to do is we need to hold space to like actually talk, have conversations about this, not just in the boardroom as well. Involve people. And I'm a huge advocate of like co-creation. So again, all things come back to all things, don't they? You're talking about the hybrid working and return to work mandates. Generally speaking, I'm against that. I don't think it's great to force loads of people back into the workplace. However, we've talked about some benefits. So what my suggestion would be, and here's me giving a suggestion or solution, but is that you've got an opportunity to design something new there. So don't just go back to exactly like you were before, but don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and not do it entirely. You've got an opportunity to design something new, and could you design that together? And
love that. I love that. And the whole co-creation thing as well, like as you were talking, you use that lovely term holding space, which is there's whole memes about like holding space.
Sure I know what that means.
But as you said it, I thought, and then you said about co-creation, but in my mind, I tell you what I saw in my mind, because so we've got an event coming up next month and people will know about it. But one of the tools that we're using in that event, and you've probably come across this already, but we're using like the World Cafe format.
Oh yeah.
Which, that I can see, I know a lot of organizations do like town halls, which often is one way, right? But there are ways of holding space and kind of allowing people to give their thoughts. So if for example, it's town halls, organizations can use Slido or Mentor or whatever, just to get some conversation going and to give people the time and space to voice their concerns. But definitely, if you can do something like a World Cafe, where it's like people can literally break out into small tables, write on the tablecloth, talk about these different themes, potentially come. So for example, I would say if you're an organization, you're thinking about a mandatory return to office mandate, right? Before you do that, literally give people a little bit of space to get into teams, talk about the challenges, come with the data, say, this maybe doesn't work for some, this maybe works for others. What could some of this, and literally kind of open it out to teams and the teams might come up with, well, hopefully we'll come up with a better solution than just a mandatory, everybody's got to come back in the office 4 days a week or whatever.
And I've spoke to senior leaders and chief executives of organizations, and they're like, yeah, we do ask people and we do consult with them, and I'm like, go on then, tell me what you did. And they're like, well, we set up a call and I introed it, and there were 2,000 people on the call, and then they all had a chance to voice their concerns. And I'm like, I wouldn't voice my concerns. Like I've not got the guts to come off the 2,000 people and voice my concerns. But like you say, if there's a different format whereby they split into these groups and all the rest of it, and I think that'd be something that even like the event industry should be doing more of. I go to some of these events, and I'm not going to badmouth them all because we've got some great relationships with some of the events that we work with, but I do think there's a risk sometimes that you walk around these events, and the ones I'm talking about, like where they've got the panel discussions and all the rest of it. You go from talk to talk, and there's some interesting stuff said online. But then you want to ask a question, and there's like 60 seconds at the end. They ask one question, and I'm like, we'd have been better having this 45 minute slot. Like, let's all just chat to each other.
Exactly. That's exactly why. And I'm not here to like plug the summit that we're doing next month, but that's exactly why we've changed it to like, no, we're not just having panel speaker. We're having conversations. Like the meat of the content is conversations. We're not creating enough space for conversations, I think.
And there's and there is some space for like a keynote and whatnot, like someone who's got some really interesting thoughts. It's like it gives you fuel for those conversations, right?
Absolutely.
Because you watch something and you're like, oh god, that's really interesting. I want to ask and I want to talk about it. So it's not just chucking people in a room and saying best of luck.
But in terms of AI, I think, Matt, your job is safe in terms of AI replacing you. So I think Sylvia said here, if you want to carry on treating well-being as a cognitive exercise, like a learning task or a tick box exercise, then yes, Matt could be replaced. I think and hope that Matt's work is more nuanced than that.
I'm not more nuanced. No, absolutely. I appreciate that, Sylvia.
A question here: how do we actually implement psychological safety? Hopefully, we've talked a little bit about that, Sylvia, in terms of the practical ways. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add, Matt, to that in terms of how we implement. And then Yam, really nice to see you in the comments. I love this conversation. One thing I'm learning in the community, and actually Yam runs a community as well. So similar to the community, I guess, that you've built around like wellbeing leads, Yam runs a community as well. So community learning is a big part of what Yam does. One thing I'm learning in the community is that a lot of people genuinely want to create psychological safety, but underestimate how uncomfortable it can feel when honesty actually enters the room, and how much time you have to protect for the pause, the listening, the follow-up, and the messy human bit where trust is actually built. Yeah, it's not easy, right? Psychological safety is not easy. On either parts, the person that's holding space and the people that are in the space as well. It takes a lot. We need to wrap things up because we've been here for a while, even though it feels like it's gone in like a blink of an eye. What is one thing that organizations can do to start shifting the wellbeing trend? If you want people to just take one thing away from this conversation, what do you want them to do maybe after this?
Admit that they don't know the answers. That's my thing. It's nice. No one is totally sure what the best thing to do is in each situation. But look, I'm biased here, but I think the role of community is in terms of just having those conversations where we say, I don't really know, but let's have a chat about it. And work it out together. And then also experimentation. Like, I'm going to give something a go, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'm going to go back to the drawing board, and I'm going to again co-create that with the people that I'm working with. So that's what I'd like to see more of, rather than this is the answer, that's the answer.
And I love what you said about the community that you lead, so the working well. So who's in that community, and how can people either join that community or find out more about it? Can you just explain?
Yeah. So we're doing a little bit of a shift at the moment, but it's a free community to join. It's primarily kind of wellbeing leaders, wellbeing managers within organizations. That probably makes up about 65 to 70% of our audience. In addition to that, there are 30-40% of like evil consultants, industry experts, people in this space. But it's an online community. So you want to go to workingwell.community and you can find a link to it. You can sign up. There's an online space. It's a closed community. We do group chats. We do coffee roulette, which seems to go down really well. So we match people up each month.
Nice.
And the only rule is you're not allowed to sell anything. So we don't sell anything to people. They don't sell anything to each other. So as long as people aren't selling stuff to each other, it's all cool. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about community learning. And where's the best place for people to connect with you if they want to hear more about the work that you do? Is LinkedIn your main space?
LinkedIn, definitely. Yeah, I'm not on Insta. No. So LinkedIn, and then we've got the YouTube channel, and then, like I say, the community space. We're also at the moment setting up a Substack as well. So that's kind of coming soon.
I'll see you in the Substack.
See you in the Substack.
See you in the Substack. Great, amazing. Alyssa, thank you. Alyssa, also thank you for joining us and for your comment. I did spot it there. Wellbeing and connection have a very human nature. AI is great for signposting, but the intrinsic feeling is neutral. Absolutely. Well, apart from people that fall in love with their chatbots, but that's a whole nother LinkedIn Live.
That's it. I did a Turing test the other day at an event. They did a Turing test, where you meant to tell the difference in a human and AI, and we couldn't do it. We couldn't tell the difference. Could not tell the difference between the responses. Scary.
Scary. Honestly, I'm so tempted to almost do like an after hours LinkedIn Live where we'll get into things like that. It was actually Junior Beeman who is in the comments that sent me an article about a woman that had fallen in love with her AI chatbot, and this chatbot were trying to figure out how to keep it alive once the system was upgraded. She even considered building her own platform. That's how crazy it is. So Matt, thank you so much for joining the conversation. It's been really interesting. Really, really interesting.
Loved it. Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Great
You're
start.
welcome. And for everybody that has joined us as well, especially if you've been here from the start. And if you're watching this on the replay, thank you so much and you got all the way to the end here. Thank you for taking an hour and 2 minutes out of your day to watch us natter on about well-being. So thank you, everybody, and have a great weekend.